Hello everyone and welcome to another very nice game from round 4 of the FTX Crypto Cup. This is the last one we'll be covering, and then we are on to round 5, as round 5 will be completely action-packed. It is world champion Magnus Carlsen versus Liem, and this game has many ups and downs, but in the end it is the, sort of the pawn storm that prevails. But you'll see what I mean by this. Magnus plays knight to f3, he goes for the reti opening, and we have knight to f6. We have pawn to g3. Magnus going for the King's Indian attack. Sorry about that. Le replies with pawn to d5. This is the Yugoslav attack variation, the basic, or rather the King's Indian attack, the Yugoslav variation. We have bishop to g2, c6 now, and Magnus castles. We have bishop to g4, and now pawn to h3, bishop h5 and c4. That's not a c4. c4 challenging the center. E6 now, as the light square bishop has been set free, and now pawn to d4 by Magnus. Bishop e7. We have knight to c3, and now Le castles. We have knight to e5. As Magnus still hasn't played the e-pawn, so you don't have to worry about any pins, just knight to e5. And this is now a monster knight. Whenever you have a position your opponent plays knight to e5, you know that that knight is pretty much staying there for the rest of the game, or at some point you might capture this knight, and then your opponent will play f4, put a pawn on f5, control all of these squares. But that's not what happens here, actually. Here, Le goes for knight f to d7, challenges the knight this way, and now there are a couple of games that reach this position, but Magnus plays c captures on d5, and this is now a new move. So already as of move 10, we have a completely new game. Now, of course, Liem captures the knight. He is very happy about this. We have d captures on e5, and now e captures on d5. C captures on d5 would have been a little bit safer, as with the pawn on e6 you have control over the f5 square, but now you can see that Magnus can just start pushing g4, f4, even e4 in some lines. So he starts with g4, bishop to g6, and pawn to f4, already threatening f5 to win the bishop on g6. We have f5 now, stopping this, and the bishop to e3. We have knight to a6, and now comes rook to c1. We have king to h8, and now, it's a very, very interesting position, but Magnus goes for the sort of the best practical chance, and that is knight captures on d5. It's a piece sacrifice, but you get 2 pawns at least for it. So it's it's a fair trade. C captures on d5, queen captures on d5, offering a queen trade, and now safest would be something like trading queens. Let's say captures, and then you try to find a good move for black. Knight to b4, maybe put pressure on the bishop, attack a2, because if you try to defend the b7 pawn, there's just no good way to do it. You can't advance the pawn as the rook hangs. You can't play this because then the a7 pawn hangs. So it's tough call to make. But here Le plays pawn to b6, and here he invites Magnus to play queen captures on a8, which means that he will keep the pawns on the queen side, but he will give up the exchange, which is an odd thing to do, to say the least. But you've seen how difficult it was to find a move after the queen trade. So okay, Magnus goes for queen captures on a8, queen captures, bishop captures, and now rook captures on a8, and now Magnus plays rook f to d1. Which of course makes sense. You control the c file, you control the d file, you have some ideas of lifting the rook. But if you guys are interested, yes, a3 and b4 are the engine's favorite ideas here, even saying that once b4 is played, the position is winning for white. But okay, rook f to d1, and now king to g8. Le starts bringing the king into the game, and now pawn to e6. Magnus takes away the f7 square from the black king, bishop to c5. Also, if a3, b4, black can never use the c5 square again, and that square is useful for the bishop and for the knight. So here, rook to c3, Magnus defends the bishop. He would very much enjoy having his rook on e3 to start escorting the passed e-pawn. We have rook to e8 going after the pawn, and now rook to d5. Magnus with a little trick, as if the pawn on e6 is captured, then he can just trade on c5, for example, captures, and then win material here. There's no defense against this. So of course Le doesn't go for this. He goes knight to b4, attacks Carlsen's rook, and now Magnus has to make a choice. Is he interested, or maybe he wants to go back? This is also a possibility, but the real question is he interested in a repetition with rook e5, knight c6, rook d5, knight to b4, and so on and so on. So this is one question, but this is the third game Magnus having the white pieces for the second time. So if he accepts a repetition here, he has one more game with the black pieces, and that's not something you want to do. So instead, after this knight to b4 move, Magnus decides to give back some material, and he plays rook c captures on c5. Now saying, if you capture my rook here, I'm just gonna have I will have 1-2 pieces for the rook, and my position is just much better. Even after rook captures here, just king f2 defending the bishop, and if you count the pawns, white is up a pawn and with a much more active position. With perfect play, should be a win for Magnus. So instead, after rook captures on c5, of course b captures on c5 is a better move, and now Magnus plays rook to d6, defending his pawn on e6. So this is how he decided to play it. He keeps the e6 pawn alive. We have rook to c8, now defending the c5 pawn, but this doesn't really work for Le because Magnus just plays bishop captures on c5. This was a bit funny. Now, of course, if rook captures the bishop, then this is checkmate, as the pawn covers f7, so you have to give up the bishop, and this is now checkmate. So after bishop captures on c5, we have a5 by Le, and now a3, attacking the knight here, knight to c6, and finally pawn to b4, creating a pass pawn. A captures, we have f captures, h captures, and now bishop to e8, and now Magnus starts bringing the king into the game. King to f2, we have rook to b8, and now, okay, the b4 pawn is attacked, but Magnus just continues advancing those pawns on the king's side. Pawn to f5, knight captures on b4, and here Magnus plays g5. And now you have to be very careful what you play. Moves like knight to c6 are always useful, but here rook to b5 was played, attacking Carlsen's bishop on c5, but this just completely blunders the game, and I'm pretty sure you know why. So feel free to pause the video and win the game for Magnus while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on realizing that the back rank has completely been weakened. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is rook to d8. This is what Magnus played, and it was in this position on move 34 that Liem resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. Even though he is up a piece, there is no way of surviving this. Rook captures on d8 will be checkmate. You cannot play king to f8 as the bishop covers this, so the bishop cannot be captured. This is just mate in one. And other than that, you really don't have a good plan. You could play something like h5, try and give back the piece, but then Magnus has just so many pawns, and even you can checkmate the black king right away. Not rook to h8, but bishop to e3 will be checkmate. You have to take away the g5 square from the black king, and that's just it. So the bishop you attacked and that you couldn't grab is the one that fools you in the end. So yeah, after rook to d8, Liem resigned, and a wonderful victory for Magnus Carlsen, and he also went on to win the final game, so he wins the match by 3-1, drawing the first two games and winning the last two games. So really awesome stuff. For those of you who might have missed the previous video where Praggnanandhaa just completely obliterated his opponent, here are the standings after 4 rounds. Magnus and Praggnanandhaa still undefeated with 12 points each. Alireza following with 8 points, Levon Aronian with 5, Jan-Krzysztof Duda with 4, Anish Giri with 4, Liem with 3, and Hans Moke Niemann still with 0 points. We'll see how he does in the last 2 rounds. So for the penultimate round, we have a big clash. Magnus Carlsen will be facing Alireza Firouzja, and of course Jan-Krzysztof Duda will take on Praggnanandhaa. So we'll see what happens in that one. Will Magnus and Prag meet in the final round with 100%? That would be a dream, but I mean, of course, I I wish good luck to all players, but that would just, I think that would be very, very good for chess. So yeah, that's the game. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Very nicely done by Magnus. I would like to thank Johan Claesson, Raymond Raphael, Buntiak Pang, Amar Ashur, and Michael Sakarias for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the FTX Crypto Cup Round 5 when it starts. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.